Hello everyone, and welcome to this first video in a series of a few videos looking at building out a basic simple book club application where we're going to be creating tables, populating data with REST API calls, triggering the API calls using UI actions, and then finally in a series of videos later I will also show how you can start to build out a very simple portal, a page that displays your book data, reviews, and searching for the books that are in your book application. So in this first video, I'm going to be showing you how to build out the initial book club app, the tables that we need, the REST API calls invoked by a UI action and enhanced with a UI macro. So in this particular application, it's going to have certain foundation tables, which we'll look at in a moment. We're going to be populating, the tables can obviously be populated manually, but I'm going to show you how the data can be populated for books using a REST message and processing the REST data payload that comes back. We're going to also in this video enhance our form by adding a UI macro to display the book image. In future videos, I will also show you how you can make a very simple page, a portal page, looking at your book application with a series of widgets that we can select a particular book, we can add comments, we can see the details of that book. And we're going to be looking at how we can build that portal out with styling, with things like building the widgets, and then styling with things like cascading style sheets or CSS. Anyway, in this video, I'm going to just show you how to create a simple application called Book Club to build, and we'll be using two tables, book and book review. We will then create a REST API call to collect the book data from a third-party REST API. And then finally, we're going to invoke that REST API via a UI action that will be based upon the book form and enhance that form, the book form, with a simple UI macro. Now, for this particular application, it's pretty simple. The name of the application will be Book Club, and we've basically got two key tables. We've got the book table with things like the title, author, category, description, and so on. And we've got the book review table, which will reference the book table, so it's a one-to-many relationship. The book review table will reference the book. It will enable the reviewer to add comments, rate the book, and we will also capture in the book review who the user was, who the reviewer was. Now, for this particular application, we're going to be using a key attribute called the ISBN, which is kind of like a unique number for books, and the ISBN is the actual attribute that we will use to invoke our REST API call, the parameter that we will pass to the API call to get a specific book record. So in this first video then, I'm going to show you how to create the application called Book Club and build the associated tables. So let's build out our application for our book club. So I'm going to go to Studio here. I'll go to here and I'm going to create a new application. Let's get started. And I'll give my application a name. I'll just call it Book Club. Like so. Scoped application. So recording books and reviews. And I'll go create. So let's let that create. Now at this point, I could go through and create all of the different objects for my application. What I might just do here is just create one admin role. So I'll just call it admin. and I'll create that role. And at this point, as I say, I could carry on going through and populating the data and going through design, but at this point I'm just going to go straight to the studio environment, go to my book club here, and I've got my application ready to be configured. So the next thing we've got to do is create our first tables. That's really the starting point for your application. So I'm going to create two tables, one for the books and one for the book reviews. So let's create an application file, data model, we want a table, so I'll create our table. And we'll give it the name book, like so. And that's going to create an underlying table name here. Maybe we'll create a menu as well. So I'll just call this book club. We'll put that table available in that menu. Now at this point, I need to create my table columns. So we'll create some columns for our book table. So first one we will have is the title of the book. It will be a string, and we'll say the max length is 75 here. Now there is an option on the right here called display. Now generally speaking, for a table there is one column that will be the display column, and what that really means is when this particular a record from this particular table is referenced from another table, like the book review table, what do you want to see displayed in the reference field on that other table? And in this case, I think we want to see the title of the book. We could do maybe the ISBN, possibly, but let's choose the book title as the display value for this table. So we've got our title. Then we've got we will also then create author. So let's just create our author column again, which is a string, and we'll also make this 75 max characters. Category, and a string. And again 75 characters maximum. Description, put the description column in. So this is going to be a longer column, so this will have more text in it. So we'll choose, make sure I've got my string here, and we'll make that 1,500 characters max, like so. Next one, our ISBN number for our book number. Again, that's going to be a string, and that will make 20 characters in length. Ebook, so we're going to say certain types of books will be like ebooks. So I'll make that into a true false field. So it's either going to be an ebook or not. Then we want a particular, this is a particular next field is image link. And that's if we want a reference to a URL that will hold the graphic of the book. So I'm going to call this column image link, and I'll make the type URL, like so. And then final we will have here is type. Now with type, I see this as being either fiction or non-fiction. So I'm going to actually make this into a choice field here. And the length, let's just do some max length on the image link as well. So we'll say 150 on that. And on the type field, fiction or non-fiction, let's say 10 characters in length. Let's say, so that will be our book table. So let's submit that and create that table. All right, so we've got our first table created. Now we're going to create our second table, which is the book review table. So create an application file again here, table, create. So we'll call this book review. Our book review table here. I'm not going to create a new menu. I'm going to use an existing menu, book club. So we'll have a table reference on the book club menu that we created earlier. And let's create our columns here. So we've got the comments. So that's kind of like the review comments. So I'll just put comments in here. Type, again, is going to be a string. Like so, and length, let's put in 1,500 because we want to maybe have quite a bit of text that we want to input. Rating, so I'm going to also include a field called rating. Now that I might decide on how I might want that to be, maybe between 1 and 5, or let's say for the moment I'm going to keep it as a string field. I'm not really sure what I will do with this field at this point. I might create it into some sort of a number range, but for the moment I'll leave it as a string. And let's make that 10 characters in length. Then we've got, now we've got two new other fields. We want to know who made the comment and what was the book. Now in this case, we need two fields that reference other tables. So let's firstly create our first field. Let's call it commentator, or review. Let's put reviewer. It's probably a better name. So let's say reviewer, and then here we'll say it's a reference field. And in this case, what table are we referencing? It's going to be the sys_user table. So hopefully I can locate that. Let's just see if I can locate that table. Give me one moment. There it is there. There we are. All right, so that's our user table. I'll give that another shot here. That's better. Yeah, so we've got our user table. And then also we've then got our book table. So we want to reference the book. So again, it's going to be a reference field. And this will be the book table, which is here. And there is my book review table, so we'll submit that. All right, so we've got our two tables. We've got our book table and we've got our book review table. Now I'm going to go to the native platform here and just look at my new app, which is called my new menu. I can go to the menu here. I think I probably need to refresh the instance. So let's just refresh. And let's see if we can see our new menu. Yeah, so here's our book club menu. So we've got our book reviews and our books here. And in the books table, let's just open this up. Let's just create a new book for the moment. And you can see my type here. You remember I was going to say this was going to be fiction and non-fiction. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to right click on that field and I am going to show choice list here, and I'm going to create some new choices. So I only really want two. So I'm going to put in here, the table is my books table, and the label will be fiction. And then the underlying value, which we would need to refer to sometimes if we're using a script. So we'd be referring to the value rather than the label. So here I'm just going to give it the name fiction. In fact, what I will also do is also specify the sequence. So we'll put that one as the first item in the list, and then we'll create a new one. and this one will be non-fiction. Here, so I'll just put in here I'll put this all as one word, non-fiction, and put that as second on the list, and we'll submit that. Okay, so that's my choice list. Let's see if we've now got our choice list working. Yeah, so there we are, we've got fiction and non-fiction. So there we are, so we've created our app, and our initial app, and we've created our first two tables in that application, the book and the book reviews. Okay, so now we've created our application and our key foundation tables. Now we're going to look at how we can actually use a REST API to help us populate new record data into our book table. Now, to do this particular API call, we need a URL. This is a public URL, a Google API, and the API requires a parameter which will be the book's ISBN. So you can see the URLs are shown here, and you can use these URLs to test in your browser. And when you pass in from your browser the API URL with a ISBN number, you will get back a JSON payload, which you can see in the top right. Now, I'm actually going to be using, to then navigate that payload and to understand that payload, I'm going to be using a JSON viewer. You can see the URL there, jsonviewer.stack.hu. You may have your own JSON viewer, or you might be using a browser that has that ability to view the JSON payload. But if you look in the bottom right of this screen, of this slide, you can see that with the JSON viewer, we get a much more structured view of the JSON, which we can then use to write our scripts. Once you've got your URL, what I will do is we will create a REST message configuration in ServiceNow. So you give your REST message a name, in this case ISBN query, and then we put in the URL that we want for the REST API call. What happens then when you save the record is, in this case, the ServiceNow will then create a default method, a default GET method for this particular REST API. What we then need to do is we need to parameterize this API call by using an expression within the URL. And here you can see we're using this expression $brace ISBN $, and that will be the parameter that we will pass in to pass individual book ISBN numbers into the API call. And then you create within the REST message configuration a test example record. So it's called variable substitutions. You refer to your parameter, which in this case is ISBN, and then you give a test value. So in this case, I'm using a specific ISBN number. We know if the API works because when you click on test, you should then get a JSON payload returned. In the bottom right, you can also see then there is a script available. There is on the REST message configuration. There's an option then to view the script that you can use to then invoke that REST API call. So this is the next section then. I'm going to show you how to create an outbound REST message and test the results. So we're going to populate our book table using a REST API. So I'm actually going to create a REST message to enable our configuration to actually invoke that REST API. So to do this, I'm going to go to REST messages, go REST message here, and I'm going to create a new REST message, and I'm going to call it, I'll just give it the name ISBN query. So this REST message will actually use a Google-based API, and the requirement for the API is to supply the unique book number, the ISBN number, and then the API should return the details of that book. Now I've got the URL here, which I will show you. So if we can see here, this is the actual Google API URL here, which I need to specify here in my REST message configuration. Now when I save this, so this is a public API, you could do a Google search for it and you would find this API. But in this case, I'm using it to, as I say, generate book data. Now you can see once I saved that REST API URL, it's actually created me a default GET method. So with REST, you may be aware that it has a preset number of operations that you can use with REST, GET being one of them. You've got also POST. So GET is a read operation, POST is like an insert update operation. But in this case, I'm using this default GET operation. Now I'm going to open up that record. Now I have to do another thing here now. If we see here, so we can see here that this URL requires an ISBN parameter, which you can see here. Now, in order to get our REST message to work by creating this parameter, we need to make a slight adjustment to this ISBN parameter here by putting in the replacing ISBN with $curly ISBN. And that tells the system, the ServiceNow system, to process a parameter. So this is a very typical thing. This is going to be an expression that is going to be input into our API call. So I've just replaced ISBN with $ISBN brace. Now if I'll just save that here. Now what we need to do is we need to test to see whether or not this API is actually going to work. So what we can do also at the bottom of this API call is create a test variable that we could use then to test that the API actually works. So I'm going to go new here, and I'm going to put in the name of my parameter, which we know the parameter was ISBN. And then here we put in an actual value that we want to test the API call with. So here, if we come back to my notepad here, I've got an ISBN number here, which I will use as my test number, like so, and I can then submit that. Okay, so now what I've got here now is I've got my get method with my URL with this parameter. And here we can see I've defined a test value for this ISBN parameter with this value here. So what we can do now is we can test to see if we get a result from this API call. So let's click on the test option here. And if you can see here now, we can see our parameter has been populated and shown here. And then here you can see it looks like we're getting some information coming back, quite a lot of information there, coming back from that API call. Now, let's just come back to the top here. So you can see in one moment, let me just come back to the top of the call. Okay, so we can see here we do have a book name, a mathematics textbook, and so that is what that ISBN is returning us. Now, of course, you may be aware that this response, this data that's come back from the API call, is in a specific data format, which we call JSON, JavaScript object notation, which is basically a combination of name and value pairs separated by colons and commas. Now, it can be difficult to read this data as it stands. So there are JSON viewers that you can use to then look at the data in a more structured way. In my case, there are different types of JSON viewers here. The one I'm going to use here is this JSON viewer here. So I'm just going to put this into my search menu, search bar, my browser search. And then all I need to do then is select all the data. So I'll just select all the data here, copy it, and then put it into my JSON viewer here, like so. And then when we click on the viewer here, we can now see the structure of the JSON data. And this is really important when we come to parsing the data, how we're actually going to extract the information out of this JSON payload is where we need to understand how the data is actually structured. So if we can see here, we've got something called items, and items is basically an array of different objects. If we go to the zero-based item here, we can see we've got volume info, and there we can see the title of our book. We can see the publisher, and so on. And so this is the important thing that we need to be aware of when we come to process the API call. All right, so what we've got then now is we've got a REST message called ISBN query, and we can see that it works. We're passing in a test value, which we've just done, and we know that we're getting a payload back. So that is going to be the basis of one of the ways that we're going to populate our books table. Okay, so now we've actually tested our REST API call and we're getting a successful result coming back. Now we're going to use that script, that invoking script, and we're going to use it in a UI action. So in this case, we're going to create a UI action, which will display a form link on the book form. And we're going to use code to then invoke the REST API call and process the JSON payload that comes back and update our book record. So the first part of the code will actually invoke the REST API call, and it will pass in a parameter. So we can see a current.isbn is the parameter that we're passing in, which is the ISBN number from the current book. Then we are going to, once we get our payload come back, we're going to process the payload using a JSON.parse expression. This is a JavaScript expression that really does the magic that enables us to then step through the JSON payload to then pick up the values and update our book record. And so we do that through kind of a method called .walking. So in this case, I've passed all of the JSON payload into a variable called bk, and from bk I can then .walk to various different values within that payload, whether it's the title, the author, the description, and so on. What I've also done here is I've just done a simple error handling within the code as well, just in case no data comes back from the ISBN number that was referenced, and I'm just going to display a message stating that there were no books returned from the ISBN value. So in this next bit, I'm going to show you how to create a form UI action, call the REST API, and process the returned JSON payload. Okay, so now we've created our REST message configuration. Now we need to invoke it. Now in this example, I'm going to invoke the REST call via a UI action. So I'm going to put a link on the book form to populate the book record using the ISBN number that is on the current record. So to do this, I'm going to go to my REST message first here, and if I just go to my REST message here, and I'll pick up on my ISBN query. And one of the really useful things of using this configuration is you've got this option here called preview script usage. Now that gives you the script that the JavaScript that you can use to invoke the REST call. So I'm going to select that item there, and now you can see I've got this code here which I'm going to copy. So I'll just copy that. And the next thing I'm going to do is now I'm going to create my UI action. So I'm going to go to UI actions, And let's go to UI actions here. And I'll create a new UI action. Just let that update. Okay, so you can see I'm in the application book club here, and I'm going to create my link. So I'm going to call it update book data from Google API. So let's choose that. The table that we're updating is our book table, which is here. Now I'm going to create this into a form link that is only available on existing records. So show on update, not show on new records. So I'm going to choose that. And then what I'm going to do then is I'm going to paste my script that I copied from the REST message. And I'll need to make some updates to this, and I will explain the updates in a moment. But for now, I'm just going to save this record. So I'll save my UI action here, and let's just create a favorite of it. So I'm just going to create a favorite of this, like so. Now, what I'm going to also do here is when I write my script, I do need to be aware of the structure of the JSON payload. So what I'm going to do is I'll just go back to my REST message a moment here. I will go to my ISBN configuration, open up the test option here, and I'll run test. Now I'm going to go to my JSON viewer. So I'm just going to select my JSON viewer here. So I'll just put that into my URL, into my browser. Let's just try that again. Try that, refresh that, and there we are. Yeah, so there's my my browser there with my JSON viewer, and I'm going to just select the entire content of that JSON payload, and I'll put it into my JSON viewer here. So I'll just put that into there, and now you can see I've got on the viewer side, you can see here I've got my data structure, and I need to refer to that data structure when I'm writing my code. So let's go back to our script in our UI action, and I'm going to walk through the code that we're writing here. So let's look at the code. Now, first thing we've got here is this line here makes a call to our REST message. So this is the line that is saying we're going to invoke a REST message, and that is the line here. Now what we've also specified here is the parameter that we require, and this is the parameter that will be passed into the REST call. Now what you can see here is there's a literal value here of an ISBN number, which is our test value. So what we want to do is we want to replace that with the value that is on the current record that we're invoking the UI action from. So I'm going to replace that literal there, and I'm going to put in here current.isbn, and of course ISBN is the column, the attribute, the table attribute that we want to look at in order to pass that value into the JSON, into the REST call. So okay, so that's that line there. Now this line here actually does the actual call. So this r.execute is actually going to make the REST message call, and the payload will then be populated into this response variable. What we've then got in this payload is the body text of the payload. So that's the actual bit that we want to process. So this get body has obviously been provided by the test script, and we're populating the payload into this response body object. Okay, so the next thing then is we need to write some code to build this out. So what I'm going to do here then is I'm going to create a object here called BK, as in book, and I am going to use a built-in JavaScript parser called json.parse, and I'm going to parse the payload that we captured from the REST call. So in this case, that will be our response body here. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to put that into my line of code here. Right, so that bit is really doing the magic. That bit there is taking the JSON payload and then putting it into a format that we can actually navigate using our script. Now, I'm now going to put in a new line here, and I'm going to test to see if any data has been returned. So I'm going to say if BK, and if we look at our item here, we got total items here. So that should be greater than 0 if we've got a payload coming back. So I'm just going to put in here, if BK dot total items is not equal to 0. So that is basically saying if we've got some data coming back, right? So that is our first test, and you can see I'm doing a kind of like a dot walking, using this BK object, which has got all of our JSON structures. You can see here I've got total items here, so BK dot total items. If that is greater than 0, if that is not equal to 0, then we know we've got a payload. Then I'm going to start to populate my record with the data from that payload. So I'm going to use the current object here, which is the current record that is on display. So I'm going to say current dot title, which is the title attribute here, equals, and now we have to dot walk our JSON payload. Now I'm going to put the code in here. So I'm going to put in here BK dot items, and the items are actually in a kind of like in what we call an array, and it's the very first section of that array. And if we look at our JSON viewer here, you can see we've got items, and that is an array here, and we're interested in the set of attributes at this object here at 0. So there's different values that you can see in these objects that are in this array. Now the first thing we want, for example, is we want the title, and the title is here under volume info. So we've got to go items dot 0 dot volume info dot title. So in theory, that's what we need. So we got items 0 dot volume info dot title, like so. And hopefully that will populate our title value. So I'm going to put in a few others, current dot author. Now what I will do here is I'll just copy and paste the previous line, that bit there, but we just got to make sure we've dot walked to the right part. So let's go back to our, so we got so it's actually this thing here, which is another array in our volume info. So here we've got 2 authors. At this point I'm just going to take I think that I'm just going to assume the first one, which will be at index 0. I could build something out to parse the that array, but for now I'll just take the first author. So here I need to change this to authors, and of course that is an array, so I only want the first author in the array. So I've put that there. Now what I'll do is, just to save time, I'll just copy and paste that, and we'll just put in a few other lines here. So the next one we want is the description of the book. So I'll just put in description here, like so. And let's have a look at where our description is. So we have got volume info. Yeah, so there is our description there. So that's what we need. So we want, instead of authors, here we want volume info dot description, like so. Let's go to our next line. Okay, so the next one we want is, I want the image link. So for that, again, my attribute name, I think, is image underscore link. And let's have a look if we can find our image link. Let's see. One moment. Image links, here we are. Small thumbnail, that's what we want. So that's the thing I'm going to choose. So we've got volume info dot image links dot small thumbnail, I believe that is. All right, so let's try that. So we got volume info dot image, let me just check I've got the writing of this correct. Image links dot, and then we have our let's see, small thumbnail. Okay, I've got to make sure I've got the case of the text correct. So capital T. All right, so hopefully that is okay. Just a couple of others. I will just choose here maybe category. So current.category, and it is again here. Just have a quick look at categories. Volume info. Is it somewhere here? Give me 1 minute. Oh yeah, categories, here it is. So again, there's an array here. I'm just going to say 0. There might be more than one. Again, in my code, I might eventually process it so I pick up on all the categories, but here I'll just put in here BK items, volume info, and then we want categories. And the first category, which is an index 0. Okay, so that is my population of my record. Of course, with any reference to the current record, I need to do a final operation called current.update to instruct to update the current record. There. Now, of course, what I might do is, what I should be doing here is handling any issue if there is missing data or there's no data payload. So I'm going to put in an else statement here. So if there is no data, so if there's no data, I'll just display a message, gs.addInfo message here, .addInfo message, and I'll just put a little message in here, no books in the database for that ISBN. No book. Let's just put no book in the database for that ISBN. All right, okay. Now the final thing I want to do is, you can imagine that I'm clicking on this link on the form. So what I want to do then is I want to execute this code, but I want to stay on the current record. Now to do that, there's a little action that you can write called action.set redirect URL to the current record. Now you'll see this type of technique on many UI actions. If you look at any of the baseline UI actions, you'll see this type of instruction, which basically means as soon as you've executed the code, don't leave the form, stay on the current form. So that's that line there that just says stay on the current form. So that's really what I want. And I think that's pretty much it. Unless I've made some typos in my logic here, in my code. But anyway, hopefully that's okay. Let's update our UI action and let's see if it works. Now, if there is any issue, then we'll have a look at the code and see if we can spot the problem. But anyway, let's go to our books here, and I will create a new record. And let's take an ISBN number. So I'll just grab an ISBN number here. Maybe let's take this one here. And let's put the ISBN number in, like so. Now I'm going to save this record. Now once I've saved the record, you can now see I've got this link here, update data from Google API. Now if I've got this right, when I click that, the REST API will be called, passing in the ISBN value that I've got on the record, and hopefully it will update the other values on this record. But let's see. All right, yes, and it looks like we're good. So you can see here now I've got my author, I've got the description, I've got the image link, I've got a category here. Yeah, so if we just do one more, I'll just update that. So that's my first book. Let's create a new book here. I'll put in another ISBN here. So let's take another ISBN. Let's take this one here. Let's put that in here. We'll save the record. That will make our UI action available. So we'll update from Google API and hopefully, yep, and there we are. We've got our new book reference here. We can click on update and there we are. And there is our integration with the Google API. So in this last section, we're going to enhance our book form by adding a UI macro with a formatter to display the book image on the form. Okay, so the final thing I'm going to do in this section is I'm going to actually create a UI macro with a formatter to display the image thumbnail of the book on the book form. So if we just observe our book club records here a minute, so I'll just go to books here. So we've got a book here, we've got the description, we've got the image link reference here, ISBN and so on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to display a little graphic of the book on our form. And to do that, we're going to use a UI macro. So I'm going to go to UI macros here. Now, UI macros are not a trivial thing in terms of the writing of the code. My recommendation to you, if you ever want to do a UI macro, is maybe have a look at some of the existing UI macros that are there and see if you can maybe adapt something similar to what you require on your form. But in this case, I would just go through a very simple example. So I'm going to choose to name my UI macro book preview. So I'll call it book preview here. Now this is the bit where we're using something called Jelly script or Jelly code. Now the idea of this is really these Jelly code components are made up of ServiceNow script, which is evaluated, and then the HTML that we want to represent that data that we've gathered from the script on our macro. So for this, I'm going to use an expression called G2 and then colon evaluate. Now this is basically telling the Jelly code that the next bit of code is actually to be executed as a kind of like ServiceNow script. With the G2 evaluate, I'm going to hold the result of that executed code in a variable, which I'm going to declare here. So I'm going to call it var equals. Now, the idea of using jelly variables is you prefix them with this reference called jvar. So I'm going to name my my variable jvar and then img for image, like so. So I'm going to name a variable jvar image here, and in my G2 expression, give me a moment. Like so. I then put in my expression. Now in this case, I'm going to create another variable in here, so I'll just call it book image. So I'll create a variable called bimg, and then I'm going to say the current records. Then I want the value from the current record. Now remember, this UI macro is going to display on a form, so I'm looking up the current image link for the current record. So that's the image link attribute on the current record. And then basically I'm returning from this expression the variable bimg, which I've called, book image. Now, of course, that variable is then going to be held in this variable here, which you can see called jvar image. Now, at this point, I can now write my my HTML that I want to use to actually show the results of that evaluation. So I'm just gonna specify that I'm just gonna do a center HTML reference here, and then it's basically simple HTML. And I'm going to say, well, I want an image, so I'm going to have an image here. Now, if you're familiar with HTML, when you say you want an image, you have to specify the source. What is the source of the image? And in this case, the source of the image will be my image link variable. So in this case, I need to process that variable. So I'm using $square brackets and then the name of my variable, which is jvar image. Now, as I say, Jelly is a bit of an old kind of technology. There is some documentation on, I suspect, on our documentation site. That you might find the odd YouTube video on Jelly as well. But in essence, what I'm doing in this HTML here is I'm saying I want to evaluate what was held in the evaluate part of my my code. So I'm just going to put in here, close the square bracket and close the quotes there. So the dollar there specifies that this is an expression that needs to be evaluated. And then, of course, with the image, I can also specify how big I want the image to be. So I'm just going to put some markup in here, some HTML markup, and I'll just say the height will be 140 pixels and the width will be 115 pixels, and hopefully I've got that correct, like so. So there is my code. So I've got my evaluate, which is just returning a variable from the current image link, and I'm storing it in this jelly variable here called jvar image. And then I'm using that jelly variable here to then inject into my image HTML reference here that I want to display on the form. So I hopefully, if I haven't done anything wrong with my syntax here, that should be enough. Okay, so let's, what we'll do is we'll save that macro. So let's just save the macro here. And let's just make it into a favorite. So I'll just create this as a favorite here. Now, in order to use this macro on my form, I'm going to use a configuration called a formatter. So if I go to formatters here, so if I can find formatters, and I'll go new. So I'll create a new formatter. give that a moment. Okay, so I'm going to give it the name book preview, like so. And the table is on my book table here. And I think I want here book underscore preview, which is the name of my macro. Let's just save that a moment. Let me just double check another example. Give me one moment. I always like to check maybe other examples here. Let's see what we've got here. I think that's okay. So I'm referring to a macro. So let's see if we can get this to work. So now I'm going to go to my book form. So I'll go to books here. I'll open up an existing book and I'll right click, configure form layout. And you can see I've got my book preview formatter here. So let's put that somewhere. So I'll just put it under, where shall I put this? Maybe just under image link. Okay, well, let's try it. And there we are. Yeah, so there you can see we have now our graphic on display on our form. Now, maybe what I will do is maybe I might just move that. So let me just, give me 1 minute. Let's go back to form layout. Let's put it under ISBN. So put it under ISBN there. That's going to put it on the left-hand side. All right, so that's good. So let's try this out in action now. So we can see we've got our book record and we've got this little graphic here of our book. Let's try another book. So let's go back to books here. Let's create a new book. I'll add a new ISBN. So let's take this one here. I'll put the ISBN number in here. Save the record. Hopefully in a moment. Let's save the record. That's going to give me my access again to my Google API link. So I'll click on that. Yep, and there we are. And there is our book and our description. Yeah, and there we are. Was my video then on creating a simple book app using REST messaging and enhancing with a UI macro. In following videos, I will build out a portal page with widgets that we can then interact with our application. In the meantime, if you'd like to know more about outbound REST messages and processing, there is a YouTube video that might help in your understanding of this type of configuration and technology. So I'd like to say thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.